Hey everybody, welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy, very excited for our conversation today with writer Alan Zweibel. We will talk with Alan in just a moment, but first, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please follow or subscribe and rate and review, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. So Alan Zweibel was an original Saturday Night Live writer who's won numerous Emmy and Writers Guild of America awards for his work in television, which includes It's Garry Shandling's Show, which he co-created and produced, The Late Show with David Letterman, and Curb Your Enthusiasm. In the theater, he collaborated with Billy Crystal on the Tony Award-winning play 700 Sundays, Martin Short's Fame Becomes Me, and the off-Broadway hit Bunny Bunny, Gilda Radner, sort of a romantic comedy, which he adapted from his best-selling book. In total, Alan has written 11 books, including his Thurber Prize-winning novel, The Other Shulman, and, most recently, a cultural memoir titled Laugh Lines, My Life Helping Funny People Be Funnier. Because of his diverse body of work, the Writers Guild of America East has honored Alan with a Lifetime Achievement Award. Alan, welcome into the back room.
Well, thanks for having me.
This is a big thrill for me and an honor to have you on, and really looking forward to chatting.
Oh, that's what we'll be doing?
No, we're going to... No,
was I misinformed?
I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna go play Sudoku right now, and you can
Okay.
you can do whatever you want, but we'll record it.
Well, I was going to watch, and maybe I can learn something, you know.
So, when you know how people sometimes say, like, "Oh, if you can go back in time, what would you want to go back to? What would you want to experience, like an event or a thing?" My answers are always, I would love to have been at the Woodstock concert, and I would love to have been in the writer's room of SNL at the beginning. You, my friend, were there. I'm curious to know, what was it like? Did you have any sense that it was going to be this historic, legendary thing, or was it just like another comedy gig?
No, first of all, it wasn't another comedy gig. It was my first comedy gig.
Wow.
So it's not like this was the next step. I was 24 years old, and just to back step a little bit, my dad manufactured jewelry, and he had a place in Manhattan on 52nd Street between 5th and Madison. And when I would run errands for him on, holidays from school or weekends or whatever, no matter where the errand had to go, I was 12, 13 years old. I would make sure that I would go by way of 30 Rock and go into the lobby of what was then called the RCA building. It's now the Comcast building, because Johnny Carson had the Tonight Show upstairs. In the 60s, there was a show called That Was the Week That Was. And so there were people in that building doing what I wanted to do someday. And now, July 7th, 1975, I'm reporting to work in that very same building. And as far as knowing what this was about, we had our very, very first meeting that day in Lorne's office. It was the writers and the actors. And I'm looking around, and my background had been writing jokes for Catskill comedians. Okay, $7 a joke they paid me. That was the going rate. And my audition for Lorne was a binder that had about 1,100 jokes in it. I showed him that, and he hired me based on that, because he knew he was going to need somebody who was proficient in writing jokes. There would be a weekend update, and there would be a need for that. And I was just in awe. I mean, I saw Gilda and Belushi and Chevy and Danny, before the meeting started. They had improv backgrounds. It was Second City. I saw them creating scenes right in front of me, okay, and building on each other with an energy. Once again, I wrote for comics, and so whatever I wrote for them, they delivered outward, okay, to an audience. Here, they were actually actors facing each other, playing off of each other, and building scenes. God, it was great.
But those guys weren't famous,
nervous.
right? Like, when you saw them, you were like, I don't know who these people are. I mean, they may be funny, and they were performing in front of you, and it was great. But it wasn't like you looked and was like, oh my God, there's John Belushi. Like, these were all unknowns, right?
No, because who the hell was John Belushi?
Right.
Who the hell was Gilda? Interesting. sidebar over here, the same exact week or within a 10-day period of when I found out that I was going to get a job on this new show, I also ended up being offered a job to write the questions and bluff answers for Paul Lynde on the Hollywood Squares. Okay. And for half a second, it was a consideration which show, because, well, Hollywood Squares is in LA. That's where the whole business is. It's prime time. It was going into its 9th season. All the stars and all the boxes, they all had Las Vegas acts and their own variety shows. This would be an entree into the business, whereas 11:30 to 1 on Saturday night, who's what? Angry people are watching TV then because they're not getting laid. They're turning on television. Okay.
Some people who get laid are angry too. Let's just not.
Well, yeah, there is that kind.
Let's not offend the
that's a
sexually
different-
promiscuous.
You know something? I can't wait until we get to that part. But these were people my age, my sensibility, and I didn't want to write for Charles Nelson Riley. All right, even if this doesn't work, at least these are my peers, And so, but as far as looking into the future and how long, I think Lorne had a 7-show deal with NBC, okay, 6 or 7 shows. And he insisted no pilot, okay, because he figured it would take a handful of shows for the show to ultimately define itself. What is, okay, what are we going to present over here? So all I knew is that I had a contract for these 6 or 7 shows. And I was an apprentice writer, which meant that the Writers Guild was allowed to pay me less than the minimum. Al Franken and his partner, Tom Davis, were also apprentice writers. And we would then get bumped up to whatever the minimum wage was, the minimum salary at the when the options were up at that 6 or 7 week period. All I knew is that I was going to have stuff that was on television. I wasn't smart enough to even have, or I wasn't seasoned enough to even have a calculated guess as to what was going to be going forward.
So I want to continue with SNL in a minute, but I want to just peel the onion back a little bit and start at the beginning, at your childhood for a few minutes, because I always love to try to understand where people come from, because often there's this interesting connective tissue between what kind of kids they were and the adults they grew up to be and the work they do. So were you like a class clown? Were you the funny kid? Were you the shy kid? Were you an athletic kid? What were you like as a little kid?
I was an athletic kid. I was an athletic kid, but I also discovered early on that I could be funny. We had moved from one school to another in my sophomore year.
Now, did you grow up in Wantagh?
Wantagh, and then moved to Woodmere.
That's an odd coincidence you and I have, because my mother currently lives in Wantagh, and my first wife was from Woodmere, and I was from Far Rockaway.
Oh my God! So this is.
I spent so much time in Woodmere.
Well, that's where we moved to Woodmere in the middle of my sophomore year in high school. Okay, I went to Hewlett High School because that's where Woodmere kids went. And I was now going to go to school with kids who knew each other since kindergarten. I was the new kid. Yes, I went out for the basketball team, and by some fluke, I made the team. Okay, but in general, so I met guys that way, I met kids that way, but in general, somewhere in there, I discovered that I could make people laugh, and that broke down social barriers. Okay, I ingratiated myself, so I kept on feeding it. Prior to that, look, growing up, there was the First Family album, which we paid
Vaughn Meter.
Vaughn Meter. There was a 2,000-Year-Old Man. Alan Sherman was a big influence, if you remember his songs.
Yeah, there was a camp song, right? Alan Sherman.
Hello, Mother, Hello, Father.
Right.
And I started doing those, but putting in my own words. And so it was an instinct that I had to try to do my own version of Alan Sherman, if you will. And I just kept on feeding. There's a little bit of a hobby that, but with sports and or whatever. But when I got to Hewlett and I saw that it ingratiated me, I kept on feeding that, And then it was when I went to college, I went to Buffalo, where I froze my ass off for 4 years. I stayed in my dorm room and I started writing jokes, writing little scenes that I sent to Mad Magazine. It was a hobby, but the jokes, it was interesting because like Dick Cavett had a show at the time, the Tonight Show. I would send in a joke. There was no internet, obviously, at that time. So I'd mail something in on Monday. And on Thursday, I would watch the show to see if any of my jokes made it into the monologues. And it didn't, but they were close enough. I'm going, wow, I wrote the snowstorm joke to go this way. They went to it gave me encouragement that maybe I had something to offer, So I didn't take it as a defeat by any means. I just looked for the positive of it. And that's where I nurtured that.
And when you say jokes, like, were you the kind of guy that was just straight up set up punchline, bing, bang, boom kind of jokes?
Yeah, it would be that, but I would also react to whatever the situation was. So there was a facility there too, And I just, when I graduated college, all my friends, it was so scary because they all went to go to law school and med school and dental school. And all the law schools in the country told me that, no, try to become a comedy writer. No, thank you, but no.
Sure, your parents love that, by the way.
They were very supportive. They were really cool. I moved back in with them after college, and I didn't know how to become a comedy writer. I got a job in a delicatessen. You name it. It was in Far Rockaway.
Wow.
It was, is it called Beach Boulevard?
Well, there was Seagirt Boulevard, and there was...
It wasn't Seagirt.
Beach Channel Drive.
That's what it was.
Uh-huh. Wow.
Okay. And so I was working in a deli, and then my mother and father...
Take my pastrami, please.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. My mother and father went to Lake Tahoe on vacation, and they went into the nightclub one night, and Engelbert Humperdinck, if you remember that name.
I think it's safe to assume for the audience that you and I are both around 100. So yeah, I know who Engelbert.
Oh yeah. No, we'll
Humperdinck
be talking
is.
about Lincoln very soon. I know that. So they went to see Engelbert Humperdinck, but his opening act was a Catskill comic named Morty Gunty.
Sure, okay. I know that too. Oh God, I am 100.
Yeah, it's getting sadder and sadder. My mother ran into him in a coffee shop the next morning, said that her son wants to become a comedy writer. He gave her his phone number. I called him.
Wow.
And I started selling jokes to him.
Wow.
Okay. And then other cats.
He paid you the full $7, or did you was $7 like the you had to work up to $7?
That was the going rate, but here, this was the cool thing. Cool. It pissed me off like crazy back then. I would go to their house, I would write jokes, or I'd send them in prior. I'd go up to the Catskills with them, and I'd sit in the back to see if my jokes worked, okay? And it was not unusual for the comic to come off stage and go, boy, that joke about paving the driveway really went into the toilet. And I'm going, no, I heard laughs. And then we would haggle, and I go home with $4. Okay, so
they would tell you in front of you when you heard the actual audience reaction.
I heard laughs.
That it was different than what you actually heard.
Yeah,
as a negotiating tool. Wow.
That's exactly right. So I'm handling with
Suddenly I'm like imagining Jackie Mason go, that joke sucked. Here's $2.
Yeah, that's exactly. It wasn't Jackie Mason. It might as well have been.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Jackie Mason in those days was a big name compared to the guys Morty Gunty, Dick Lord, Dick Capri, Vic Arnell, Billy Baxter, Freddie Roman.
Freddie Roman was a funny dude.
He was really funny, a very, very nice man.
And so literally your first gig was SNL?
It was my first gig.
Wow.
I got tired of writing for these comics. They were very nice to me, but I saw that the Catskills were dying. It wasn't my sensibility. It was like writing for my parents' generation, okay? So I looked around and I go, okay, where's the new Catskills? Where's the new breeding ground? And here in New York, it's, there were two clubs. There was Catch a Rising Star, and there was the Improvisation. And that's where David Brenner and Robert Klein and
Comic
Louis
strip too,
Tomlin-
right? Upper East Side. Comic strip was like the third.
The comic strip hadn't even opened yet.
Oh,
That
wow.
was like 80. This is, I started hanging out there 73, 74. Comic strip wasn't even in existence then. And those were big places that were very popular. And I took all the jokes that comics wouldn't buy from me because it was too hip for their rooms, okay? Because it wasn't, mother-in-law jokes. I took those jokes, and the plan was to make a stand-up act for myself with the hopes that a manager or an agent would come in, like the material, and maybe want to represent me, to submit me to some TV show. And I did that for about 4 months. And during that time, I met another guy who was just starting out. His name was Billy Crystal. And he lived about 4 towns. I was in Woodmere. He was in Long Beach. And he used to pick me up every night in his little Volkswagen. We'd drive into the city. We'd do our respective sets at Catch a Rising Star, and we record it, okay? And then on the way home, we'd listen to those cassettes and give each other notes on what worked, maybe if you said it this way, and whatever. And 4 months into this experiment, Lorne Michaels saw me, okay? He was going to all these clubs, anywhere in New York, looking for writers and actors for this new show he was thinking about. Hated me as a comic. I was not to be liked. I had no sense of performance, but he liked the material, wanted to see more. And I had an interview with him 2-3 days later, came into the city, and I had a binder, yay big, with about 1,100 jokes that I had written. That was my audition piece.
Wow.
And 2 or 3 days after that, I got a phone call that I had a job.
And you wrote some incredible skits, the Samurai for Belushi, Rosanna Dana for Gilda Radner, and Emily Latella. Those are that's like yesterday from the Beatles. You know what I mean? Like those are, that's classic
I appreciate
shit.
that. But I really appreciate that. But what's interesting is those were pure, very good examples of collaboration. With Rosanna Dana, Gilda had done that character unnamed in a public service announcement that was written by a writer named Rosie Schuster, and where Gilda had that wig, had that dialect. I think the name of the PSA was "Hire the Incompetent." Okay, so her vignette was to talk about how she got fired from Burger King because, they found a hair in one of the hamburgers. She scratched herself under her arms while she was saying it. And I was having dinner with Gilda about 2-3 weeks later. I said, "Hey, remember that that woman that you did?" I said, "I was producing Weekend Update." And I said, "Why don't we move her into Weekend Update and have her do consumer reports?" Not unlike, and there was a woman on WABC named Roseanne Scampella.
Yeah, I remember her, sure.
And Gilda said, without even a hitch, she said, "Okay, could we name her Rosanna Dana?" I said, "Well, fine. Where did you come up with that?" Remember that song from the 60s, The Name Game, Johnny Bobani, Banana? If you put Roseanne in there, somewhere like the 9th stanza, it comes out Rosanna Dana. We named her that, put her in there, and we started developing this character. She got a letter every week from a guy named Richard Fader from Fort Lee, New Jersey. He's my brother-in-law. Okay, and the thing just took off, and so once again, it was me and Gilbert collaborating, but initially, I had seen that character in a different situation elsewhere. Same thing with the Samurai. John auditioned for the show with that character. okay? And then one of the other writers named Tom Schiller, he wrote Samurai Hotel. And it worked really. I think Richard Pryor was in
Mm-hmm.
was for
Sure.
the Pryor
Amazing
show.
skit. Mm-hmm.
And then about 3, 4 shows later, the 11th show we ever did, Buck Henry was hosting, and Lorne walks by my desk and goes, before you came here, you worked in a deli, right?
Mm-hmm.
I said, yeah. He says, you think you can write Samurai Delicatessen? I went, oh, you bet, boss. Okay, then he walked away. I had no idea what the hell I was going to do.
All that deli experience you had.
I pulled it, taking a number, standing on line,
Mm-hmm.
cutting the thing. And I wrote it, and then I wrote the next 12 or whatever it was.
Mm. Those were amazing. The one with Richard Pryor in particular was pretty classic. I was married to Adrienne Shelley. She was a actor and a filmmaker. She wrote the movie Waitress.
Sure.
She always reminded me of Gilda Radner. They were both small and cute and funny and silly and lovable. Tell me about your relationship. You guys obviously were collaborators professionally, but you were involved personally or almost were?
Well, we were platonic lovers, let's put it that way. I had written a book shortly, a couple of years after she passed away, called Bunny Bunny, Gilda Radner, a sort of love story. And it, look, we hit it off initially. We made each other laugh. She was a little scared of New York because she was from Detroit, came here by way of Toronto, second city. I grew up on Long Island. My dad worked in New York. New York was my city. So we started hanging out and going to dinner, made each other laugh a lot, and we started collaborating, not exclusively by any means, but we did. And it ended up that she was the godmother of our 3 children. All right. So, and the last TV appearance she ever made was on a show that I co-created called It's Garry Shandling Show.
Mm-hmm.
And Gilda was, I think we thought that she was in remission at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And she got nominated for an Emmy for that appearance. And in the wake of that, Shandling and Gilda and I was started to create a TV show for Gilda. And the TV show would be where she was the star of a variety kind of show. And you would see the writer's room. You would see, the rehearsals. You would see her at home. And then the cancer came back with a vengeance. And that premise Garry took, and he just grafted it into a talk show, and that became Larry Sanders. Okay, I still have the notes here somewhere, but so the relationship was incredibly close. And
did you want more? Like, were you in love with her?
Oh God, yeah, but she would have none of it. It's a matter of fact, when she, oh God, this was a full court press for 14 years. And when she got sick, and I went to I went to Cedars-Sinai Hospital in LA, okay, to give blood. Because the nurse came up to me, and I was like on a gurney, right? And the nurse gave me a pad and a pen. And I said, what's this for? She says, well, Gilda likes to know whose blood she's getting. Write her something nice, she's having a tough time. And I wrote, Dear Gilda, I knew I'd get some fluid of mine into you one way or another. So
that's hot.
That pretty much epitomized the whole relationship.
Yeah, that's hot.
That's hot.
What's the significance of bunny? The word bunny.
Well, as a young girl, the first day of every month, the first words out of her mouth was a superstition where she would say bunny, bunny. And that was, some girls say rabbit, rabbit. On Long Island, we said rabbi, rabbi. No, that was a superstition that she did even as an adult, the first day of every month. So when she passed, and I wrote this book, which I then adapted into a play that ran off Broadway for a while. I called it Bunny Bunny. It was my way of saying hi to her.
You know, it's really interesting. Adrian was a fan of Gilda, as I'm sure a lot of young women who were entering show business at around, the 80s. And like a lot of actors, she at times was a struggling actor. And when she was struggling, she would buy and sell vintage clothing. And her name on eBay was Bunny's Vintage. And now,
that's interesting.
and now I'm wondering if that was, I never asked her where'd you get Bunny from, but
that's interesting.
I wonder if she knew that.
Wow, it's all very possible because Gilda was very she was vocal and somewhat public about even her innermost feelings and secrets, whatever. That's why I think she had that quality where, when she died, people felt that they lost a friend, even if they had never met her, because she exposed herself, and if she had trouble with guys, she had demons, later bulimia. I had never heard of bulimia. I didn't even know what it was until, there's a word for what she does. You know what I'm saying? So, but she was very, very vocal about those things. And it was embracing that somebody I've often been asked what I thought her greatest talent was. And I personally, aside from all the, dialects and everything that she did to my sense of humor, I think that her ability to be vulnerable, publicly vulnerable, and I think people attach themselves to that.
Yeah. If you watch the documentary Love Gilda, you get that loud and clear, and she is lovable and vulnerable, but you really do see her under the worst of times, and you fall in love with her. You get the essence of who she was.
When we did Love Gilda, we went to the premiere of it. My wife and I were executive producers on it, and they used a lot of our footage, our home footage, and so I had never seen. Well, maybe I saw a rough cut of it, but we went to the premiere of it at the Tribeca Film Festival, and had our children. And look, when they were growing up, they go, "Wait a second, why is Aunt Gilda on television?" They knew her as a person, as almost a sort of a relative first. But the kids were surrounded us. We have 3 children, and they were looking at this as if they're looking at a home movie. Oh, I remember that Seder that Gilda came to. I remember when she put the makeup on me before I went trick-or-treating and that stuff. So there was something, but some of that footage that I saw in Love Gilda, I never saw that stuff from the hospital bed before until I saw that. I never saw a lot of that stuff. So it was, and once again, what came through there, aside from her talent and the fun history, to see Marty Short and John Candy from back then, all that was, here was this girl whose dad died when she was 14 or 15, never really got over it. When he was alive, she became funny to try to make him laugh. And when he passed, I believe that she was still trying to make him laugh. Okay. And boy, that all came through.
Tell me how old Gilda was again when she died.
Well, she was 39. She was she died on my birthday. She died she died in 1989. So on my 39th birthday.
Wow.
And she would have been 43 the following month. She was born in June.
That's another crazy coincidence. Adrian died at 40 and her dad died when she was 12.
Wow.
So she
my friend Jessie Nelson,
sure.
She wrote
I know Jessie. I know Jessie.
She's a good pal.
Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah, she's great. She's great. She did a great job on that show, and it was a tough gig for her, and she navigated that really, really well. She stayed very true to the script.
She's got a lot of grace. Yeah. She's got a lot of grace, and she's got a wonderful kind of life philosophy when it comes to dealing with assessing certain situations and how to deal with it, especially things that she has no control over. She's she's quite a spirit, and she's quite an example to a lot of us how we should be, as opposed to the hotheads most of us are.
Yeah, no, she she did handle that situation with grace. And I had met her back in '08. I was producing a film called Serious Moonlight that Adrian had written and was shopping around
Ah,
before her death. And Meg Ryan was our star, and Jesse and Meg were very, very good friends. And so we were at the Nantucket Film Festival together, all of us, and
oh
it was
wow,
great. It was a great time to get Adrian's work out there and get to meet Jesse. So
sure.
you've worked with some amazing comic legends. I mean, Letterman, Shandling, Martin Short, Billy Crystal, Larry David.
You
It's like the
know,
Hall of Fame.
you know, a lot of us started out together. You know, Billy Crystal and I
Hmm.
started out together. Larry David and I met at those clubs those few months that I was a comic before I got the job on SNL, and he still remains. We send each other our Wordle scores every morning. You know, so if that doesn't show how close we are, I don't know what is. And I've been really lucky that way in terms of the collaboration. It's a very interesting thing about Marty Short. When I first met Gilda, and it was maybe a month into the show, and she just looked at me one day and she says, Martin Short is the funniest person on the planet. And I didn't know who that was because I wasn't on Second City yet. I didn't know who that was. And then I saw him do Ed Grimley.
Ed Grimley was the funniest thing ever.
Okay. Then I call up Gilda. I go, holy shit, you're right. My God.
I
And
really
then
must
she's,
say.
yes, yes. And then she said to me, I want you two to become friends. I said, oh, okay. She says, no, I'm serious, Zweibel. It's important. So through the years, we knew each other through mutual friends, run into each other, see each other at a party. And then we both shared the same manager, a man named Bernie Brillstein.
Hmm.
And Bernie called me. We lived in New Jersey. I had just come off of a book tour from one of my books. And I walk into the house. The phone is ringing. I pick it up. It's Bernie. Hey, kid. I go, hey, I just came in from the book tour. He goes, fuck that. Martin Short is doing a show that's going to go right into the shit house if it doesn't get some help. Bernie was very eloquent, as you can see. He says, get your ass out to San Francisco. I fly to San Francisco. I see the show. And I call Bernie and I meet with Marty. And I said, I think I could help. Good. All right. So I replaced the writer, and we then went to Toronto, and we opened in Toronto, and Eugene Levy had a party at his house to celebrate the opening of Marty's show. So Catherine O'Hara was there. The Second City people were
Hmm.
there. And at one point, Eugene makes a little speech why we're here. He was very funny. And then he invokes Gilda's name. He says, with us in spirit is Gilda. And me and Marty looked at each other from across this table that we were standing on opposite sides of. And it was like what Gilda had willed.
Hmm.
Okay. And today we're still very good friends, very good friends. And, but I learned early on that, look, I write books by myself. I write stuff movies by myself. So I go on TV to talk shows, to publicize whatever I have that's current. But so I get off that way. Okay. That need in me, if there's an audience I'm speaking in front of at a college or an industrial show, that's great. But the collaborative part, I'm also writing books and movies with Dave Barry.
Mm.
It's a social thing. So I like that a lot. I love the synergy of 1 and 1 equaling 3. And I think the reason that I've been successful in writing with so many people is you just take your ego and you put it here. It's all about the work.
Mm-hmm.
There's no competition. There's no, hey, do it my way. No, it's none of that. Okay, if you're not comfortable saying this, even though I think you should say it, you're the one who's going to be saying it, and it's not going to come out legit if you're forcing yourself. So here was my intent of why I wrote that. If you agree with the intent, let's figure out another way to say it that you are comfortable with. So it becomes the collaboration becomes psychological to a degree. How do you deal with this person? And all that. So I've been really lucky that way.
Well, you've been lucky that you've got to collaborate with some of the most iconic comedians and comic talents in history. It's not just a collaboration.
Yeah.
I mean, you're collaborating on a scale that is epic. But one would think that with people like that the egos are so large that the collaboration would be difficult because of that. But it sounds like that wasn't the case.
No, it wasn't the case. And I'll tell you why I think that is the case. Why it wasn't the case is that because I let it be known early on, okay, I'm here to help you. All right. If you thought enough of me to ask me to collaborate, we're partners here, but I'm vice president at best. You're president because you're going to be saying this stuff.
Right.
I think I have whereas that's with performers. With Garry and I used to lock horns all the time, Shandling, okay? He was one of the funniest human beings I'd ever come across. I hate to use the word genius, but I do believe, he would come up with stuff and I'd go, wow. There's certain people who were like that. When I was with SNL, Dan Aykroyd was that way. There was a writer named Michael O'Donoghue who founded the Lampoon. And when we would read something of theirs, sometimes there's an unspoken competition among writers in the writer's room or at the read through. Oh, I should have thought of that. Damn it, I could have done that. Anytime we would read O'Donoghue or Dan Aykroyd stuff, I would just sit back and enjoy the ride because there's no way am I writing Bassomatic where you drink a fish, okay? That was Danny, all right?
Bag of glass.
Bag of glass, those characters that he did and all of that, I'm just going, wow. So you enjoy it because it's funny, but at the same time you marvel at that component that allows them to think that way. I don't think that way. Yeah, I do things they can't do, perhaps. So that's why, once again, when I would collaborate with Dan Aykroyd, you couldn't get two more unlikely partners, given our respective sensibilities. Same thing with Michael O'Donoghue. But, there was something about having a tacit respect for, all right, this person can do this, I can't do that. And you're both feeling that way. Let's see what the synergy will be.
I heard a story that Larry David told once, which was classic Larry David, but he was telling how an actor once said something like, I want to change the line. And Larry was like, nah, it's fine the way it is. Just leave it the way it is. And he's like, no, I don't think my character would say that. And Larry said, no, actually, I think he would because I wrote it. That's like, boom, done, mic drop. What do
you say to that? I created a character. The character I created would say that.
That's it. Okay. Shut up and act. I think he finished that story with like, no, so just shut up and say the line. So David Letterman, there are people on this planet who I think are really funny, but when I think of people who are like my comedy spirit animals, from their timing, their delivery, their material, their expressions, everything. Like Letterman is that for me. Like I think he's one of the funniest people that ever walked the face of this earth. And as a talk show, I mean, I was a huge Carson fan, but I got to say, I think he's as good, if not better, than Carson was.
Something, I was a guest on that show 7 or 8 times, and I loved going on it. I loved bantering with him. As a fan, when I saw what he was doing, at SNL, Ernie Kovacs was held in very, very high regard as a video pioneer, as somebody at the inception of TV. Look what he did with the medium. David did the same thing with the talk show. Now I don't remember. I was too young, I guess, to remember Steve Allen, who I understand was incredibly innovative when it came to that stuff too. But as far as Letterman was concerned, there was something not only about his mind, but there was something about his manner. There was something about how understated he was, and it was hilarious. Little throwaways, and as opposed to somebody who's in your face. You know what I mean? There was this stuff that came in underneath, and if you were lucky enough to catch it, you really appreciated it. So I agree with you.
The sarcasm out of him was epic, in an understated way.
In an understated, and by the way, the sarcasm at times was so subtle that the person he was sarcastic to and about didn't realize they were being insulted.
Right.
Okay. In this very subtle, not offensive way. But you had to listen for it. I agree with you totally there.
And he was also incredibly self-deprecating, which I think was a great counter to the subtle sarcasm, because he wasn't sitting there like a dick just making fun of people. He was more so probably making fun of himself more than anyone.
I think that there was, I agree with you totally. Again, he would make fun of himself. At times there was an acknowledged ineptitude. Okay. If he was in a situation that was running away, by itself, there was something so genuine. That's the best word I can put for it, in the sense that he wasn't playing the part of that guy. He was just himself,
He was just so funny. Do you watch SNL now?
Yes, I do. I don't watch it on Saturdays because I'm 73 now. Okay. So I get to it usually by Monday.
So it's Sunday morning live.
Yeah, there you go. I watch it because it's my alma mater. It's the same reason I root for my old high school football team. I can't play for them, but I still want them to win, you know? And I look, it's going to start, next year is the 50th anniversary. I went up there the other day doing some documentaries to commemorate the 50th, and I was in a couple of them, and one that I was up at the studio the other day, and I'm looking around, in all the memories, I can see Gilda, I can see this one, I can see Belushi in that one. I met my wife on the show. So it was just, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, how lucky was I to be a part of this? Jesus, and as far as the show is concerned today, what the show has had is the, I believe, the advantage and also disadvantage of reconstituting itself on the air, in front of us. When cast members leave, who we miss, and now new ones come in, who are they, and all that, which is incredibly brave and whatever. I think that in some ways, with possible exception of Weekend Update, where this really funny, in some ways, I think that all comedy shows right now have their hands tied a little bit, just want like comics editing themselves before they even get on stage, because am I going to piss off this group or that stuff that you don't mean any harm by?
No, I wanted to ask you about that, because I often think about, and I talk about it whenever I have a comic on the pod and we talk about the old days. I had Judd Apatow on once, and I asked him a lot about this. And you think about like that skit on SNL with Chevy Chase and Richard Pryor, dead honky. Like, can you even do half of that today? You can't.
You can't even think about that these days. You can't even. That was called word association. And I believe that Pryor and Chevy wrote that. There was also a writer that Richard brought in that week. I'll think of his name in a second. He passed away a couple of years ago. Really funny. They wrote it, right? And I remember, like, that was the 7th show we ever did. I can remember the whole first year. Oh yeah, the 16th show. Yeah, that was Desi Arnaz and Gilda had a period, and it was all the for some reason. And they did. I remember being in the studio watching it either rehearsed or performed for the dress rehearsal with the audience there. And I couldn't believe the material, how great it was. But I remember Pryor's slow burn. Every single time Chevy would throw, another name at him, and then Richard would he'd take it in. You could see he's internally seething, and then come back with the next one, which was even more outrageous than the one that Chevy had served him. You couldn't even pitch that today. There's not a chance. Look, Lorne had done an interview a few years ago for New York Times when this whole woke thing or whatever started, and he was talking about Roseanne, it couldn't be done today. The Samurai couldn't be done today. Mentioning other iconic things. Look, we have 5 grandchildren, right? And when one of them, a few years ago, when he was about 9, told me that his friend, let's say 4th grade, got in trouble because that friend said to another kid, "You gypped me out of a quarter." I didn't know that gyp came from gypsy. So
I just learned that about a year ago myself.
So wait a second. So we're pissing off gypsies now, and that's a thing? Okay. People
Yes.
who come to your town
Yes, we are.
and sell you these weird potions.
Yeah.
Okay.
I get it, and I understand that there's a need to be sensitive to marginalized communities and minorities, and I'm a minority. I'm a Jew. I'm a minority. But at the same time, when you think about the history of comedy, people like Lenny Bruce and George Carlin and Pryor and the early Chappelle years. I mean, I just saw a Chappelle skit the other day, which I haven't seen in years. I can't even say the name of the skit because it's a variation of the N-word, but it's about a white family whose last name is basically the N-word. Oh my God, it's the most brilliantly funny thing I've ever seen in my life. But comedy, you used to be able to use comedy as like a scorching way to spotlight all the ills in the world and make people think about important shit through the lens of humor.
Absolutely.
And you can't do that anymore. It's like we put all these guardrails on everything. It's just it saddens me that like you can't do certain skits like that anymore. Like should it be offensive? It's comedy. You got to be able to laugh at shit,
It's interesting because I agree with you 1,000%. And it used to be that we all made fun of each other, and then we went to lunch together afterwards. You know what I mean? It was playground stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you go on YouTube and look at the Rat Pack.
Sure.
Okay, you'll see where they're holding Sammy Davis Jr. presenting him as a gift from the NAACP.
It's crazy. It's crazy what they did with Sammy.
And people were laughing, and you think Don Rickles would stand 30 seconds on the stage now?
Right. There'd be no Rickles.
There would be no. So you think about who there wouldn't be, and you're right about who expand. The boundaries, the parameters. They are the Lenny Bruces. Look at Python. Look what they did with the Queen. Look what they did with the Catholic Church. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Go back to Jonathan Swift. Okay. Look at Gulliver's Travels and all of that. This is all about holding a mirror and learning from it.
Mm-hmm.
It's so out of hand. But I think, I have no way of really knowing this, so I could be totally wrong, that it's starting to be opposed a little bit. It's starting to be opposed because it's so out of hand. But I ran into Chris Rock about a year ago, and I asked him how it was going, and he had also told me, he had vowed that he wasn't going to go out and do colleges because you get there, they give you a list of the subjects you're not allowed to talk about.
Wow.
And colleges were always the bastion of liberalism, right?
Yeah.
All different ideas and this and that. And now it's so guarded. You used guardrails before, and that's a very apt term. That's absolutely right.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think that the pendulum swings back when it's swung too far in one direction. And I think it has swung a bit too far. And I would agree that I think we're going to see it come back. So you've written 11 books. Like most people can just tackle one career. Like, all right, I'm good at comedy. You film, theater, books. Do you consider yourself a jack of all trades and a master of nothing, or do you think you're a master of everything?
I've always considered myself a writer, and where I have been very fortunate is, look, get an idea. And I've had the luxury of saying, how is the best way to express this idea? Is this idea a novel? Is this idea a screenplay? Maybe this idea is just a short sprint. Maybe it's a three-piece thing for the New Yorker, where I've also written. There's a online magazine now called Airmail that a lot of us are contributing to. And so those ideas, I'll send it to Graydon Carter. I think he'll like it and he'll publish it. So it's up for others to tell me whether I am a master of any of them or none of them. But I just serviced the idea the best I could. And that's a very fortunate luxury I've had.
No, you've had an illustrious career. You can't. It's hard to use that term with a lot of people, but your career speaks for itself. And I could literally talk to you for hours. The last thing I want to ask you is there anything you're working on now that you want to plug? What are you doing next?
I'm just about finished with a novel that's taken me literally 11 years. Obviously, I've done other stuff during these 11 years, and I think I just about got it right. I'll let I'll let my publisher know that Dave Barry and I wrote a book called Lunatics, a number of years ago, and we just finished the screenplay for it because it was optioned. And I'm working on something with Barry Levinson, which is a dream come true because not only is he a friend, he's Barry Levinson, so I do have a lot of fingers in a lot of different pies or pots, wherever fingers go, I've got them there.
Bowling balls.
Yes,
some other places, which we're not going to talk about.
But not now.
But you also wrote a book, which I love this title, A Field Guide to the Jewish People, who they are, where they come from, what to feed them, and much more. What do you feed a Jew? These days, what do you feed a Jew these days?
These days, it's not easy. Look, if you treat every day as Passover, you can't go wrong, okay? That book came about because I was speaking at some book fair, I guess in Arizona, and there's like 1,100 people that I would be talking to, and it was an author at every table, and I looked at the roster, and at one table was an author named Adam Mansbach. I had just become familiar with his name that week, coincidentally. He had written a children's book called Go to Fuck to Sleep. Okay?
Oh, I know that book, yeah.
Sold a gazillion copies. It was really funny, so I sought him out. We became friendly. We wrote a couple of middle grade books together. Then we were down at Miami Book Fair. I introduced him to Dave Barry, who I had already written with, and we were already friends. So we said, let's do something together. Adam said, why don't we do a parody of the Passover Haggadah? Okay. Dave Barry gave it the title, For This We Left Egypt. Okay. And it did very well enough for us the same publisher gave us another book for the three of us. And that was The Field Guide to the Jewish People. So once again, we all had our individual things that we were writing, the solitary things, but here was the social thing. Oh, look what came in my inbox. Another chapter that I can react to, So that's how, so if you do it, otherwise you'll blow your brains out. You spend too much time alone in a room trying to be funny. It's an unnatural act.
Yeah, no, I would imagine the collaborative process, especially the ones you've had. I mean, it's incredible. And I'm not lying when I say I could sit here for the next 6 hours listening to all your stories, which means you'll have to come back on.
I'll be happy to. This has been a pleasure, really.
Yeah, likewise.
Anytime you want me, I'm around.
Okay. Thanks so much for doing this, Alan.
Take care, Andy.
Bye-bye. This episode of The Back Room was edited and produced by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-edited and co-produced by Maddie Rosenberg and co-produced by Jen Hammoud. Our theme song was composed by Andrew Hollander, and our logo was designed by Cricket Langell. And special thanks to Patricia Wind. Please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, and also follow or subscribe. Until next time, keep your eyes on Washington, Hollywood, and your own backyards, and have a great week.